Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you. Hi, everybody. This is Ross Pallone with the Rossaround Backstage podcast. I'm here today talking to Dan Tracey. He is my good friend. He is a singer, songwriter, guitar player, producer, and he is currently in the Alan Parsons band. And he also spent some time with Bad Company. And we're going to talk to Dan today about his musical career. So let's get started and ask Dan, how did you get started in this business, Danny?
Hey, Ross. It started when I was a young boy. I think I was 5 years old, and my oldest brother, Dave, was playing his Ludwig kit down in the basement, and I just thought it was fantastic. I was mesmerized. So when he got up and left, I sat down and started playing a basic beat. Of course, he heard it and came running downstairs and kind of gave me, some pointers and helped me along. And from there, I was listening to all the music that my brothers and sisters and my parents had. So I'd be putting on like a full Elvis live concert and learning the drum parts, and kind of ramping up my technique and my skills. I just loved to play. It was great. And we had this big old tube, console stereo down there that just seemed louder than thunder, man. And what kid doesn't want to bang on the drums for 4 hours? My parents were great because they would let all this go on. My poor dad was, retired Navy, and he's up, tying flies at the room right above me, and I'm just wreaking havoc down there. I'm sure it wasn't great to begin with either. So that's how it started. And then I think a little later on, my mom, brought me to the piano and showed me, hey, this is a C chord, this is an F, this is a G. A basic 1-4-5, really. And from there, I kind of started teaching myself piano. That was an instrument, and still is today. When I want to relax or when I want to compose, that's the instrument I go to. Even strangely enough, when I'm listening for guitar parts, rather than see the guitar neck in my mind, I always see the piano keyboard in my mind, and helps me arrange guitar parts much better. So, I kind of went down that road with piano for a little while. At one point, I think I was 7 or 8, and my mom took me down to Gurley's Music, which is no longer there, in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, tiny little store. And I walked in, and the guy behind the counter said, "You want to play guitar?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Let me see your hands." So I put my hand up, and of course, I'm 7 or 8 years old. It's tiny. And he says, I don't think you're ready to play guitar. So my mom was a little frustrated hearing this, and she said, hand him a guitar. So the guy hands me a guitar, and I think I started playing Day Tripper. And he goes, "Oh, so you can play a little already?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Okay, I'll take you on for a lesson." But I ended up hating it. It was all book learning. Every good boy does fine, which is the way he really should have been teaching me. But I needed inspiration in the form of more licks, get me going down the road a little more. And that did happen later on. But guitar also got great because on my mom's side of the family, she comes from 9 kids, and all the boys played instruments in her family. So all the uncles. So we'd go to family reunions in New Jersey, and there would be a full-on band there playing like The Ventures and just all these great songs. There's a Kind of Hush, The Carpenters, there's Turn Around, Look at Me, all this great classic stuff. And these guys were all playing vintage guitars, but they didn't know they were vintage guitars. These were guitars that they were given when they were kids. So they're playing all these great...
Right, so at that time, right. They were new guitars.
That's
really,
right.
then, right?
Exactly. Well, they probably weren't new to them, but they're playing like, late 50s, early 60s Stratocasters and some really cool K guitars and Jazz Masters. So, and I remember my Uncle Johnny had this drum kit that literally looked like it was straight out of an early Buddy Rich film. I mean, just calf skin, the whole 9 yards. And it was thunderous, to a kid who's young like that. And I just ate it up. And, they're plugging in these old microphones into heavily reverbed, Ampeg amps where, it had a microphone input, accordion, and guitar. Of course, There was no accordion playing, but it just sounded great. And this is in a backyard. And they would just roll down all these songs. And I was so influenced by that it just, made me want to run home and practice and play all the time, which is what I did.
You could picture yourself up there on the stage then, right?
Yeah, I wasn't. A lot of people ask me that. I just have never been one of those people that thought, gosh, I'd love to be a star. That wasn't it. I just loved music so much that I wanted to create. I wanted the camaraderie of being in a band and playing with the other guys and making something. And there's just nothing that feels like that. And it's still to this day, it's the same thing. I get the biggest reward out of, hey, we went out and kicked butt tonight as a band. Everybody has an off night, but I never think of it that way. I always think of it as how did we slay the dragon tonight? Did the crowd really get their money's worth? And I've always looked at it like that. Of course, as a kid, I came up on watching the Osmond Show, the Jackson Show, Jackson 5s, all that stuff. So you couldn't help but go, oh wow, cool, they have cool outfits and they're on stage. But to be honest, the guys that were really inspiring me were like watching shows like the Glenn Campbell Hour and hearing that songwriting. I didn't know who Jimmy Webb was until I was an adult, but those songs were like, holy cow, they ripped out your heart, even as a kid.
Wow. Yeah. So you were a sophisticated listener back then,
huh? Yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember when my brothers and sisters would bring home new records, I literally in my mind would be critiquing them. Like, at the time I liked very polished vocals and very produced stuff. Even back then, if you listen to the Ventures, that stuff is produced, even for back then. Or if, the Carpenters, I loved the polished, produced stuff. Now they would all of a sudden play me Sweet Hitchhiker by Creedence, and I would go, ugh, listen, that guy's, he's out of tune on bar 4. So even back then, I had discerning ears, but I also, later on as an adult, I learned to really appreciate all kinds of singers and all kinds of music. And that was the nice thing about having older brothers and sisters that would, turn me on to all that stuff. It was great.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I had older sisters too, very responsible for a lot of my musical tastes,
right?
Too. Yeah, definitely.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to put you on the spot because we were just talking about that song that was actually really influential in my musical upbringing, "Lies" by the Knickerbockers. And I'm telling you how much I love that song on the bus one day, and you go, "Oh yeah, my sister used to date that guy." I was like, "What?"
Yeah, she dated the organ player in the band. Yeah, he was a sideman.
Yeah,
but yeah, he went on tour with them and stuff, and that was actually. That was probably it may have been the actual first professional band that I ever saw play in a nightclub. It was pretty impressive. I sat right in front of that drummer, and like you, I was totally inspired by watching, a band play on stage. It blows your mind when you're only, a kid. You're
sure.
Like 10 years old and stuff. It's mind-boggling.
Isn't it funny? You can actually remember like what the place smelled like. I mean, that's what the kind of impression that left on me. That kind of stuff when I'd see bands. Right here is where you have to insert that section of the song from "Lies" by the Knickerbockers. So people that haven't heard that fantastic band get turned on to it.
I wish I could, but I don't own the rights to it, Dan. So,
well, go out and find it. YouTube it.
Yeah, that's a great song. Anyway, yeah. This period of time, you're young. You're around 10 years old or so, right?
Yeah, you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. That whole period there. A lot of practicing. Kids are out playing. I'm absolutely, knee deep and just playing. I mean, I still remember we had a big mirror on the other side, and like all kids, it would hold a hairbrush in front of the mirror and sing. I didn't have a hairbrush, but I did have a mic and my guitar, and it would always be feet away from that mirror, and I would just play all day. I'd learn songs all day, tweak with my my amps, do pedals, all that kind of stuff, and back then there's no YouTube obviously and all that, so my research came from reading liner notes, which I still love to this day. So I knew a lot about the bands, and I think you've experienced it with me maybe on the bus when somebody will yell out a band and I'll be like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 and these are the guys in the band, and everybody's like, what? And it's all because I was a big liner note reader, and I knew who the producers were and the side guys that played on it, all that stuff. I just thought it was great because it was art, and I wanted to find out who was making this art.
Now, Dan, when you were this age, were you playing all three instruments, piano, bass, and guitar, or piano, drums, and guitar?
Yep.
Or were you just concentrating on one instrument?
No, I was kind of playing all three of those. I'd get bored with something and then jump somewhere else and make up songs. And, I remember one day I went to school and we had a brand new music teacher. I still remember he pulled in a little VW. It wasn't a Bug. I can't even remember what this thing was, and he was real hip and young, and, we had an older lady the year before. And we were in class one day, and we left music class, and I was sitting over at the piano, just kind of hung out. And I started playing the Simon and Garfunkel song, slow down, you move too fast, on the piano. And I think I was 9 at this point, and he came over and he's like, are you taking piano lessons? And I said, no. And he said, wow. He said, do you play any other instruments? And I was telling him. And this guy, Neil Rinaldi, really took an interest in me and just kind of really moved my career along. Even as a young kid, he was completely always had my back and turned me on to new music. He was the first guy that showed me what multi-track recording was. In class, he sat down and put on a Stevie Wonder song. And then he had the chalkboard up and he would write down, this is what the drums are playing, this is what the bass is playing. We were like, oh, and then it clicked with me. And that actually inspired me to take a couple of, cassette players, because cassette had just come out and start bouncing back and forth. I remember I was doing the big harmony vocal to Carry On Our Wayward Sons when it was a brand new song. And my parents were like, what are you doing? And I'd bounce all the parts back and forth until this big choir appeared, and my father's like, how did he learn to do that, So it was,
wow.
It was kind of fun, and taught me a lot about recording, of course, because, as you know, it starts getting really hissy, and then your next question is, how do I get rid of that, So I did a lot of experimenting like that. My parents were great. They let me tinker all the time and never put boundaries up for music or anything like that. Anyhow, so, yeah, they were really great with me. But this teacher, the great thing about this teacher was I had him all through elementary school. I went to middle school, and I kind of had my first band in middle school and played at one of the concerts, and it was like a big deal. It was like kind of like the Beatles for me. All the kids were screaming, but it's a kid band, so how could they not? And the parents were enjoying it, and I kind of got a little rep as being the music kid, which was nice. But then when I got to high school, lo and behold, that great music teacher had moved in to the high school, okay? And with him, he brought a bunch of great ideas. Now, think about high school back then, and this is going to be 1980, my freshman year. And, of course, we still had all the leftover stuff. It was a beat-up, monstrosity of different types of beat-up instruments. There were no guitars. There were no bass guitars. You were expected to bring all that. They had marching band instruments, and those were beat up, and they had really beat-up drums, and there wasn't a drum set. So this guy, on his first week there, comes through the door and brings a brand-new Pearl double bass drum set. Okay, now I'd just been destroying the vinyl on Exit Stage Left by Rush and learning all this stuff, And I come in, and all of a sudden there's a real kit with 2 bass drums. Are you kidding me? Well, what I didn't know this whole time is Neil was a fantastic drummer. He had a cover band in town that played all over Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and they were great. They were all badasses, all of them. To this day, I'll say that. That band was a bunch of badasses. Anyway, so Neil sat down, and I heard him play the kit when he first started tuning it. And I'll never forget the first time you sit next to what I call a, quote, real drummer that has feel. You know what I'm talking about, Ross? And this pocket was like so deep you could swim in it. And I was just like, wow. It just felt amazing. So I just tried to pick up everything I could from this guy. What's he doing that makes it swing like that, And I didn't even know it was called swinging. I just knew it felt good. So I really watched him a lot. But then he brought in other stuff. He brought in a $20,000 PA installed in in the school. I mean, he really fought for the music program and built it from nothing into us becoming one of the most recognized jazz bands in the country. I mean, we went to Berkeley, we went to Hart School of Music, and we ripped. He had a great band. He was very good at putting a great, I call it baseball team. When I'm making any band, you got to have a good baseball team. And he was really good about putting people in the right positions. And he was a great music director. Always picked really cool stuff. I mean, we were playing Africa in marching band the year it came out, not like now where it's 20 years later. The year it came out. Mm-hmm. For our street beat, he let me play Crazy Train on the xylophone. I mean, he was hip and really inspirational. He was great. Taught us about recording. He had a recording class.
That's good to hear.
Had it all.
That's great to hear that a teacher would be that inspiring and be hip to what you kids wanted to do. Yeah,
he was great. He was just young enough to be hip and just old enough to keep us in line. And later that year, I think I want to say my junior year, we had another guy come in, John Gianfrido, and he was a choir director, and he put together this choir, and I thought, well, guys don't go in choir. And I think he'd heard me sing a little bit with my little band I had going on, and he's like, you just stop me in the hall. You're going to be in choir. And I was like, and he said, you come down at such and such. So I went down, and I remember he laid out the parts to this song. I think it was called "The Maid." Early one morning, Anyhow, he'll know the tune. And he laid out the parts to everybody. It was just absolutely stunningly beautiful. And I'm like, all right, I'm in choir. That's it. And I did as much as I could to soak all that in as well and listen to the arrangements. And he also became a mentor. To this day, I stay in contact with him, and I love the guy. You know, he's like a second father. And he also helped guide me. And just an instance stands out. You know, I was being a little brat one day because, music came easy to me. So, I was in class or something, and I did something smart ass, and he pulled me over and he said, you have a gift, and you have to use it wisely and not waste it and use it to teach these other people. Don't use it as a weapon and be a smart ass about this. This is a responsibility for you. And he goes, I expect more out of you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sink in?
Big time. Big time. Made me get serious. So this same year, there was a band in town made up of brothers. They're called it was the Savages, Mark Savage and Tommy Savage, Michael Savage, and Stephen Savage. And I'd played football for years with these kids. Great family. Their parents were off the boat from Ireland. This is Connecticut, so we're not far off from the gates of immigration initially through Ellis Island, all that stuff. So all of my friends were Italian and Greek and Irish. We had all that in our town. It was a big defense industry town, so all those different ethnicities were there. But the Savages were great, and father very colorful guy, really loud, boisterous, a lot of fun. But these guys, man, they were the best. They came up to me one day in the middle of the band room, and he said, "We want you to join our band." And I kind of had a little band with a couple of guys, and we were playing Rush tunes, and it was a three-piece thing and all this. And the Savages were different because they had horns. They had a horn section. The three brothers played horns, and the youngest brother is like an off-the-charts fantastic drummer. By the way, this band is still playing today, and they still pack them in. So that speaks volumes.
Oh, really?
That speaks volumes, yeah. Still playing. Tommy's no longer with us. He passed away from cancer, very sadly, but the band is still going. So anyhow, they asked me to join this band. I thought about it for a couple of days, and I said, yeah, I want to do it. So went over. We're at their basement. Now, when these guys rehearse, they are Tommy, the oldest brother, sax player. He's the band leader. He cracks the whip, man. I'm not used to this. I'm used to jamming in my basement with these guys, and you just get good from repeatedly jamming. Tommy's stopping the band at 6 bars in and going, no, let's redo this. All right, now let's just play the bridge over and over until it's perfect. I'm like, wow. This guy's a jerk. I want to jam.
A real band leader.
It was a real band leader. And they would be so into it that I kid you not, they would jump off their instruments and start fist fighting. And not fist fighting because somebody called them a name, fist fighting because somebody came in 2 beats early.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean,
That's hardcore.
It was great. They were great and great guys. But you know what? When you were in that band, you felt like a gang, man. And I started playing out on Friday nights. I think, I'm going to back up because I think it definitely happened a little earlier than high school. But I think I was 14 years old. I remember having my 14th birthday in a club that I was playing. My dad wasn't too happy about that. I had a steady Friday night gig at 14 years old. And Tommy would introduce me as, he's only 14 years old, But that was great for me.
And you were playing guitar?
I was playing guitar and keyboards, whatever was required in that band. And I sang all the really high stuff. I'm still doing that today, I guess. But I sang like the Led Zeppelin. I remember we were playing The Ocean, and then we'd do I'm Your Captain, and I would do the, I'm getting closer to, that whole thing. And it was a great band. We'd sang harmonies and stuff, and it felt like a family band, It was great. And, I learned more about gear and a PA system, all that stuff. So it was a really great learning experience and really taught me to be professional, how to dress professional, how to be on time, how to show up, you better know your stuff, be rehearsed, be prepared.
What was the name of that band?
Well, it started off, we called it Airborne because, again, we were a defense industry town. And we were right next to an international airport, Bradley International Airport. And, there was all these shops that would sell all the old Army and Navy stuff, an Army-Navy store. And I remember we were in there one day and we thought, wow, this looks cool. They had the Death from Above thing. And we're like, Airborne, that's it, So we called it Airborne, but it morphed into the name the Savage Brothers. Just made more sense. And so that's where it went from there. But, man, that was a great band, a lot of fun. And then, again, in high school, we were doing the jazz band thing. I played drums, and I remember we went to Berkeley and played Caravan, Duke Ellington hit, and except I added in the double bass because I thought it would be cool. But the nice thing is there were some younger judges, and, you listen to the tapes after, and I remember him going, is this kid going to be able to keep this tempo up with these 2 bass drums, And I ended up getting a really nice award that year, so that was a little shot in the arm. But I just never felt like I was going to be a drummer. I don't know why. I just felt like I didn't want to be, boxed into one instrument. I enjoyed playing drums. It was fun. It wasn't one of those things where I woke up in the morning going, gosh, I got to play drums today. So I really like just playing a bunch of instruments and composing. Always writing songs. Of course, like everybody else, they started out absolutely horrible about girlfriends and anything else, views on the world and all that stuff. I guess we can kind of leap forward a little bit. I had a local band up there with a bunch of really good players. The band was called Teacher's Pet, and we got spotted by this woman, Lisa Ratner, who had written a bunch of hits, and she was now a producer in her own right, but she wrote Kiss Me in the Rain for Barbra Streisand and worked from Face to Face. And she also had a very successful jingle business in New York City. And back in the day, if people don't know, you could really make some money writing, selling, and singing or playing on jingles. It was a full-on business where you could make you could make a great living. So
especially when those commercials went national, right?
That's right. Well, these were all national spots in New York City. They didn't really do any local stuff. So that came a little later. But this band, it was a band of really great players, and it's in the late '80s now, and bands like Bon Jovi are just constantly on the TV, all that. So if you can imagine, this is a very Bon Jovi-esque type of band, and I wrote all the songs. They were big hook arena rock songs, and we had a big show. We were the first local band using moving lights and all that kind of stuff. We brought our own staging. We tried to do it big. So this woman, Lisa Ratner, she saw us and invited us to her studio in South Salem, New York, which was, a good hour and a half away, all through the back roads. So we went, and it was a great opportunity because now this is pretty much a really nice studio. It had a Soundcraft board and it's Trident. A Trident, and she was still using tape back then, but she had monster keyboards. I mean, she was a keyboard player. So she's kind of like the Holly Knight of the area there, you know. So she had lots of keyboards, and we probably cut 40 songs. And she also kept me focused and trying to be professional, which would be like, okay, you have to finish your lyrics by this day because we're cutting on that day, and that was new to me. So having deadlines for writing instead of just, you know, horsing around. And that band eventually petered out because that whole genre of music kind of petered out. We'd gotten as far as kind of being, I guess you could say, discovered by Tony Bon Jovi, who actually, you know, his nephew is John Bon Jovi, and he owned the power station at the time in New York and invited us to record. I think we did one tune and never got any further than that. You know, the business was just dying. Grudge came in, and, that style of music was dying. Grunge came in and kind of took over. It was a whole different thing and not my vibe. So, you know, during this time, I had also been working at a music store up there called East Coast Music Mall, and really flamboyant guy named Ed Roman. I mean, the stories, you could just look it up on the internet, and the stories are legendary, and they are true. Just give you an example. You know, one day I'm in there, I hear gunshots. I'm like, what in the world? And we go in the back, and Ed's shooting at all the product on the shelves because the stockroom was messy. And he sent everybody home for the day. He said, if we can't do this right, we're not going to do it. And we all left at 1 o'clock for the day.
He was putting bullets into his own stock?
He'd had it, man. He's shooting up the shelves. He was having a temper tantrum. Yep. Yep. There was another day when I was there opening early in the morning, and I heard a big knock at the back door, and I'm like, we don't open till 11 o'clock, pounding on this, you know, this big steel door. I said, folks, we don't open till 11. He said, open the door. So I hear it's something serious. I kind of, you know, prop the door open a little, and it's a little card comes in. It says United States Secret Service. He goes, we want to see Ed Roman. So I'm like, okay. So I run upstairs and I go, Ed, the Secret Service is here for you. Now, Ross, you know that I'm a jokester, and I always take full advantage of playing jokes on folks. Ed thought I was joking.
Yes, I know.
He thought I was joking and sat in his chair for the next 10 minutes. And I came running back up. I go, Ed, they're waiting. He goes, who? I said, the Secret Service. He goes, oh, my gosh. And he runs in and starts, you know, goes into his little vault in his office and starts moving stuff around. And apparently he had bought a large cache of weapons. He collected guns, and they wanted to see what he was doing. So it was that innocent. But there was always something going on with that guy. Another time he defecated in a box and mailed it to Disneyland because they canceled an order on him. and the only reason I know is because I walked in while he was mid-process. So anyway.
Oh, my God.
So that was one of the jobs. But the cool thing about that job is I never knew I was a salesman, but I was a salesman because I liked all the gear. I could play a lot of the instruments. So if I'd hear a sound on a keyboard, I'd instantly start playing whatever song was associated with that sound, and it helped sell the keyboard. Or I could sit down at the drums, all that. So, you know, Ed kind of took me under his wing, taught me the business. But this music store was in Danbury, Connecticut, which was kind of right outside of the cusp of, you know, the music scene in New York. And we were having a lot more people in the music biz, you know, heavy hitters move into Connecticut, into the suburbs there, because they didn't want to live in the city. So they'd buy these, you know, sprawling little farmhouses out there. And, you know, one of the guys was Ace Frehley. We had Eddie, oh, come on, big producer. It's going to drive me nuts. You know, Hendrix, all those guys.
Eddie Kramer?
Yes, thank you. Eddie Kramer, gosh, Robin Trower. You know, there was just a ton of people that came in. But long story short, you know, I one of the other guys there, Morgan Pettinato, had a guitar rig, and we were kind of putting it together and did the first left, center, right guitar rig. And gosh, we got to work with George Lynch, all these people. So we had a lot of people come through the store, and that was also really cool because I got to see that side of the music business and talk to some of these guys, you know, outside of music, but still in music, and get to know who they were and see their lifestyle, all that stuff. You know, so that was great. And that really got me into tweaking gear and all that stuff. I built a guitar rig for Ace Frehley, some stuff for Robin Trower. So it was another big learning period there for that. And, of course, I was still singing in a band. And at the same time, I had a band where I met my wife called Restless, and we were doing weddings and corporate stuff all up and down the East Coast. And that's where I hired a very young 16-year-old drummer named John Wysocki and his friend who played bass. And John's the drummer from Stained. He went on to be the drummer in Stained and a founding member of that band. Anyhow, so that's where we crossed paths. But I guess from there, I started doing jingles in Manhattan. Got to meet Joe Lynn Turner, one of my very, very favorite singers. I just love the tone of his voice. And Lisa introduced me to all these people and became a session singer, doing commercials for Cheerios, Diet Coke, Candy Shoes, Snickers, Folgers Coffee, Harley Davidson, all this stuff. And started writing some of that too. And so that was great. What I could not find,
and you were living at, were you still living at home then?
Yeah, I was living. I'd met my wife. We had just got married, and I was living in Connecticut. We were living in Connecticut in an apartment, and I would commute. I would go in and take the train into Manhattan and do what I had to do, and come home. And you know, my daughter was just born. I think she was 1 when all that stuff was going on. And the one thing that I could not find, I kept hearing about different writers here, different writers there. I'd go to write with them. No connection. I'm just like, And I'm the kind of guy, I don't want to write with somebody and be better. I want to be the worst guy in the room so that I can learn what they're doing in their craft and take that in. Hoping it rubs off, all that. And I was just always been about that. So I just couldn't find anybody that was like a real writing partner. A buddy of mine from the circuit in Massachusetts, Donald Main, had moved out to Nashville, and I was chatting with him on the phone. He's like, just come out and check it out, And I said, yeah, so I'll come out for a week. So I flew out for a week, and it was phenomenal. I already knew some other players from Connecticut. Darren Favorite, who at the time was playing with Shania Twain when she was in her heyday, took me out to all these little bars where all the big players were hanging out, man. I got to see Brent Mason. I mean, that's an experience. If you ever want to feel bad about holding a guitar, watch Brent Mason pick around when he's even tipsy, and you're just like, whoa. So I just quickly realized this town is like head and shoulders above anything that we had at home. And then when I went to my first writing appointment, I was just blown away. I'm like, I love how the creativity process happens. I love how open it is, and it was just me. It was just a fit. And I remember calling my wife on the third day, and I go, we got to move here. She goes, okay, I'm game. I'm good. Let's have an adventure. And God bless her. I mean, we had a 1-year-old. I didn't have a job in Nashville, nothing. And we didn't have much back then. We had a Saab 9000. It was a nice car, and a bunch of furniture like everybody else, and a waterbed that we sold, and my gear. And I remember I sold a lot of gear to be able to make the move, a lot. And my band was just freaked out. They're like, what do you mean you're moving to Nashville? Nashville, that's country. I said, I'm sorry, but every time I open a song, the credits, and I look, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, a pop tune, a ballad, a rock ballad, whatever. If I look on the back, they're in Nashville. It's part of this community. I got to get down there, And I said, I just want to be a better writer. So I did. I kind of rolled the dice, and I came to Nashville. That was 25 years ago this year, and we got an apartment, and I just started going to writing sessions and meeting different people, and got to write with some great people, and there's still some of my best songs that have never been cut with those people. It's just that's a different page back then, but it was fantastic. I still love it here. I love the creative atmosphere here. I love how it's not a town full of show-offs. Never has been. It's all about the work, and there's a real brotherhood here for just appreciating what the other guy does more so than a competition, And
Right. Well, everybody seems to be on the same team there rather than on opposing teams.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to fight for a slot, but it's very brotherly, and you're excited when your friends get gigs and get cuts. You're not jealous. It's I just noticed that, and I just thought it was wonderful. And it's still that way today. It's still that way. So that's one thing I really love about it. And the whole, the writing in the studio. I mean, these are some of the best studios on the planet, the best engineers, best songwriters. Everybody's heard of the A-Team. I was lucky enough to have those guys play on a bunch of my songs. And it's a pleasure, man, when you get to go in and you hear these guys that have been on all these huge hits, and they sit down with your song and they play it through one time, and it's amazing immediately. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the Nashville number system, but that's how they use it. It was developed by the Jordanaires, which were Elvis Presley's background singers, because they got tired of having to rewrite a chart every time they would change keys, which they changed keys a lot. If they were doing a song, the singer would go, Chet would go, I don't like him in that key. Let's try it in F. And the poor guys would be, rewriting their parts. So finally they figured out, well, wait a minute. Why don't we just make whatever key it's in? That'll be one. There's more to it than that. I'm just simplifying it here, but it's just a much simpler way to visualize and follow along with what you're trying to create in the studio. And the great part about that is, if you can imagine, all these dots on sheet music, it's pretty much, please play it like this, right? Well, in Nashville, you get more of an outline, okay? A lot of empty boxes. And whatever you bring to the table, your personality, your playing, the parts you create, that's what's making the song. So you get a lot more heart, in my opinion, than just playing some notes. And I really like that. I really like that about Nashville.
Dan, you continued to play in bands, and you had a band, like you said, you met your wife in a band that you had put together.
Yeah.
And you guys are still in that band. But before we get to that, I know that one of the other famous bands that you played with, you were with Bad Company for a while, correct?
Well, right. Well, what it is, it's Brian Howe was the singer all through the 90s in Bad Company, Smoke Without a Fire, all that stuff. And I was friends with the guys in Little River Band, and Mel Watts, the drummer, called me up one day, and he's like, hey, I'm not in the Little River Band anymore. He goes, how'd you like to join Bad Company? And I was like, well, hell yeah, what's going on? He tells me about it. He goes, well, it's Brian Howe from the 90s. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, it would have been great with Paul Rogers, but Brian Howe's a great singer. And we, play all the stuff. So I really didn't get an audition. They flew the other guitar player, Bobby Schneck, out to my house in Nashville, and we played 3 or 4 songs, and he called Brian and said, this is the dude. He can sing all the backgrounds. The cool part was I got to play keyboards in that band too. So I was playing the piano solo in Ready for Love and all the organ stuff. A lot of fun. Did that for a brief time. Just didn't work out. Like some jobs, you don't see eye to eye with with the owners of the business, which is fine. And he's a tremendous talent. The nice thing was, I had still been kind of working with Alan Parsons at this time. And this is before your time with the band. I guess you want me to go into all of that, huh?
Anything you got, Danny? Yeah.
So I got a call one day from a buddy of mine, Brent Jeffers. He's the keyboard tech in Journey, and he says, "Hey, can you help me and Jonathan out? We have a friend, and they need help with a piece of gear, and I think you have this piece of gear." I said, "What is it?" It's a TC Electronics voice processor. And I go, "Sure, I know that stuff." I said, "But listen, I got some sessions all week. I really can't move anything." And I said, "Well, who is it?" And he said, "It's Alan Parsons." And I said, "I'll move everything." So I wanted to meet the guy, man. I came up on these records, obviously Dark Side, some of the Beatles stuff he engineered. But I just remember my oldest brother playing Time for me upstairs in his room, and I swear to God, I felt like I was floating. And I was young, The name has always been one associated with, super high-level, high-fidelity recordings, great arrangements, great songs, smart man music, all that. And I wanted to meet him. So I flew out to Pennsylvania where they were playing at a big college. And I fixed it in like 20 minutes. It wasn't a big deal. Met Alan, just super salt-of-the-earth guy, very humble, very soft-spoken. and a big guy, as you know, very tall. He's almost 7 feet tall. And
yeah, he's giant.
Yeah, so that's a little menacing when you meet somebody for the first time who's kind of a hero and a music icon, and they're looking down on you for an extra 2 feet up, just about. Anyhow, so yeah. So I got that all fixed. I watched the show. It was a brand new band at this point that he had, and it was good. But I remember in sound check, the PA was buzzing like crazy, clicks, pops. It was really pissing me off. And it was everything I could do not to say something. And finally, I just couldn't contain myself. And I walked over to the guy at the soundboard and I went, "Please tell me you're not going to put the father of high-fidelity audio through that rat's nest." I said, listen to it. It's just nothing but 60-cycle hum. He's like, "It's the monitors." I said, "I don't think it's the monitors. I was just on stage." So I said, "Hang on." I said, "I think it's your processor. Look," I said, see how one of the meters is moving there?" I said, "I think it's your processor." So we bypassed the processor, just put the 2 XLRs together on the back, and sure enough, it got quiet, And I believe Alan and Lisa saw this because they were sitting in, not far, maybe 20 rows back in the theater during this whole thing. And he came over to me and he said, "Would you like to stay on?" And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "That." And he pointed over at the soundboard. I said, "I don't do front of house, Alan. Thank you, though." And he said, "No." He said, "Doing that." He goes, "Keeping everything organizing, make sure that the quality's there." I said, "Well, we'll talk about it tonight at dinner." So later on, we had dinner, and I remember it was getting late. We didn't chat at all, and I didn't want to push it. And he came all the way down to my end of the table and sat down. And he's like, "So, what's your story? What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a musician." I didn't get into it. You don't brag to Alan Parsons. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? So I just said, "I'm a musician. I play a couple of instruments, and I live in Nashville and this and that." And he goes, "So what did you think of the show?" And I said, "It was good." And he goes, and he laughed a little, and he said, "Just good?" I said, "Yeah, it was good." And I said, "Great band, And he says, "Oh yeah, I just got these guys. They're great." He goes, "So what are you thinking when you say good?" He kept pushing it and smiling. So I thought it was safe. And I just said, "I think a guy of your caliber and with your resume needs to have the best possible sound available." And I just didn't hear it tonight. I said, same thing with the lighting. I said, as a fan, I said, I always look at music that I love as a fan first. And I said, as a fan, I so wanted it to sound beautiful because your music is already arranged so that the mix is, kind of there when you turn it on. And I said it just sounded like there was a blanket over the PA and just missed cues with vocals, guitar solos not showing up till halfway. Just bad tone overall. I didn't want to, kick a guy, but it pained me to see this beautiful music treated like it was a garage band, and that's what it was being treated like. And so he kind of paused for a second. And he goes, "Well, what are you thinking?" And I said, "I have a friend. I have this friend, Martin Fry. He's amazing. He mixed One Republic, and I think at that point I might have got him. Brent may have gotten him hooked up with Journey. I'm not sure, but he." I said, he's amazing. You just got to hear him. So that kind of, opened the door for that. And Martin came in, and of course he was absolutely amazing. The guy knows more about sound than most people have forgotten, except for you, maybe, Ross. So he
no, Martin's a great engineer.
Yeah,
absolutely,
and just very knowledgeable guy too. So it went from there, and then he asked me to be the stage manager because I'm particular about things, and he knew I had a standard for the band of how I saw the band, and I think the vision was similar to how he saw the band. He's a guy that wants it right. I started doing that, which I never saw myself doing. And I did it for 2 years, just, taking care of the guys, just anything they could possibly need to make the show better. It was all about making the show better. Well, whether it was, I remember one time we couldn't get a fogger, and I was like, what do you mean? We can't have an Alan Parsons show without a fogger. It's ridiculous. So, I got all the local crew guys together, and I said, we're going to give you guys 4 VIP tickets to the first person who can get a fogger from one of their band member friends. And, of course, in a half hour we had a fogger. But, that kind of stuff. It's just making sure that we have everything we possibly need to make that show great, because I didn't want to see it be less than what I knew it was. And that's it. It started there, and eventually, one day I'm backstage and noodling around with the guitars and stuff, and I started singing a few of what I call the missing harmonies. I don't know that they were missing so much as maybe they didn't need anything that full, but there were some parts that were open, so I started singing those and then moving some other parts that were never quite correct. They just weren't the right note to go to. So we fixed those, and Alan overheard it, and he goes, "Was that you in there?" And I said, "It was." He goes, "That sounds beautiful." I remember it was Nothing Left to Lose, and we were doing all the answers. And I think the guys all recognized, too, that, wow, we all sing good together. One day he just said, "Phil, please put a microphone side stage for Dan Tracey." And I was like, "What?" And before you know it, I'm singing off stage and singing a bunch of the high background vocals and that kind of stuff. And one or two songs, and it went to almost every song. That was probably me pushing for that because I was having so much fun. But that's kind of how I, started doing some vocals. And then one night I went out and we were in California, my wife and I and Alan and Lisa. And he said, "Hey, Alistair's playing right down the street," which is the guitar player at the time. And he said, "We should go to the bar." And I said, "Sure." So we all went down to the bar, and I think the rest of the band met us there. And, man, I had a buzz because I'm not a wine guy, Ross. I like whiskey, vodka. We just go to this wine tasting, and I'm not spitting this stuff out. I'm just swallowing all of it. So I got a great buzz by the time we get there. So long story short, Alistair says, "Hey, come up and sing one." So I went up, and, at this point, mind you, Alan has never seen me really play guitar or sing or anything. So I went up to the microphone, and he goes, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know, let's do the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin." And I had chatted with the sound man before because I'm a control freak. And I said, 350 millisecond delay, goose it up. He's like, "All right, yeah, man." So we do the Immigrant Song, and I just remember looking over at Alan, and his eyes were like wide open. My wife told me later, he said, "Holy F," which was nice. And then he said to her, he goes, "Why isn't he in my band?" And she goes, "I don't know. Maybe you should ask him." And and it kind of went on in the same situation where we were, touring. In the meantime, I was just a little sick to my stomach over going out and not making music as much. It's just songwriting, singing, playing. For any musician, it's a big part of you, and it's your release. It makes you who you are. And I was answering all kinds of weird questions. People in town knew me as a decent player, good singer, and they were all like, "Why aren't you singing or playing in this band? What the hell are you doing? As a stage manager?" And they just got harder to answer. And especially when I started singing off stage, he's like, "Why are they keeping you off stage?" I mean, I'd see people at shows that I knew, and they could see me from the side of the curtain and be talking to their friends like, "What the hell?" So, I talked to my wife about it. I said, "I think it's time. It's time to go." She goes, "Don't throw in the towel." She goes, "You love these people. They're great people," which is true. I love the Parsons. And, all the guys in the band, they were great dudes. Crew's great. And I said, "Yeah, it's going to stink." I said, "But I got to do it." She goes, "Why don't you write him a letter?" And I said, "That's weird." I said, "I don't know if I could do that." She goes, "Sit down and be honest and write him a letter. Tell him what you think from your heart." So I did. I wrote him a short letter, and it just basically said, "Hey, I think it's time for me to move on. I'm going home completely musically unsatisfied and sad, and I said, if you by chance ever have a spot open in the band, I feel I'd be a good addition, and please think about me, And about 3 days goes by, and I'm like, well, I've insulted the boss. Who does that? So I was a little mad at myself, but I was out playing a wedding with my band, and I looked down and the phone's ringing. It says Alan Parsons. I picked it up and walked outside. He said, "Dan," he said, "I got your letter." It was very brave. And he said, "I want you to join the band. I want you to sing, play guitar, play keyboards if we need you, all of it." I go, "You're kidding." He said, "No." He goes, I let's give it a shot. Let's try it. And that's how it started. That's how I became a member of the I guess none of us are members. Alan just has a lot of musicians. But that's how I became right. That's how I became another player in the Alan Parsons Live project. And it was a great day.
Yeah. Well,
there's no rehearsal.
Yeah, of course not. No. Well, as you remember, I was working I was working for Alan as the PM and front of house mixer when you were still doing stage management.
That's right.
And you were an amazing stage manager. You were great.
Well, thank you.
You were just the best. And then I watched all that unfold. I remember when you were behind the curtain and singing and everything. And that didn't last that long before, you finally got in the band. And you're still there today.
Yep.
And I know that Alan is recording a new record, and you're part of that, too.
Yep.
You've written 2 or 3 songs on the record.
Yep.
And helping with the production and singing and everything. Yeah.
It's been great.
A good thing for you.
Yeah. I'm very, very grateful to Alan for, taking a chance on me. I think he knew what he was getting. I knew what I was getting with him. It's really a dream gig because I feel very fulfilled as a musician in this organization. He's really good about kind of letting people do what they're good at, and he doesn't put up a whole lot of walls. He wants to hear what's going on. I think that's been his mystique all through his career. He lets things unfold a little more than most producers do. I know me, myself as a producer, I'm a bit of a control freak. I hear what I hear, and I want it played a certain way. Alan really taught me to be patient and let people, let them do their thing and see what happens, and then kind of nudge the ship a little. So that's been again, he's another one of those guys in my life that's been just a really great teacher.
Yeah. Well, Dan, so besides you playing in other people's bands, you have your own, I don't know, you'd call it a wedding or corporate band that you and your wife are part of called Lipstick Blonde.
Yep.
It's very successful.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, it really never stopped. I've always been, doing this corporate band thing with my wife. She's a great singer. The Pat Benatar, Heart, all that kind of stuff, and even some new stuff. But we have a really good time doing that, and I get this. I enjoy being around my wife, unlike a lot of folks, sadly. But so we have a really great time together doing that, and we're lucky because we've got some really great. We've had some great players run through this band, especially in Nashville, and they're all these top guys. I mean, these people have no clues playing at their weddings sometimes. I remember one time our drummer just flew in because he just played the Super Bowl with Charlie Daniels and Gretchen Wilson. So it's
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. All the people that have passed through the band, they've all been a lot of fun. And we try to, same thing, it's a cover band, but we try to do it at a level that's beyond what the normal everyday wedding band / corporate band would do it at. Got a video show. We try to do epic songs that other bands won't touch, More Than a Feeling, Pour Some Sugar on Me, but we got all the samples, all the stuff going on, and all the big guitars, all that. Really, really take lots of time and care in getting the keyboard sounds dead on, the vocal arrangements dead on, guitar tones, all that. Even down to the effects for the vocals, all that stuff. Because I think it matters. People hear it a certain way. They want to hear it. We don't deviate very much from the songs that people love. If you're playing Life in the Fast Lane, nobody wants to hear your version of those solos. They want to hear those solos. So, we try to play all that stuff note for note, and we just keep the bar high doing that. And again, that's fun. I get to do it with my wife. So that's exciting. And I have, in the last few years through that band, I met this guy, Robert Wright, who's a very successful producer in town. And I actually had a friend of mine hand me a CD, and it said, Robert Wright, Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm like, great. So I threw it in the seat of my car, and it sat there for 3 weeks. I went down and washed my car one day. I see this CD, pick it up, throw it in, and start driving. I hear the intro. I'm like, wow. I mean, not only was it all the parts there and just amazing, but the recording was amazing. And I knew he did it out of his house. And I'm like, all the drum sounds were just everything. It just sounded amazing. He played all the parts, sang all the parts, played the drums, bass, everything, and produced it, engineered it, the whole 9 yards. Absolutely blew my mind. I could not get to my cell phone quick enough. So I called him up. First, I got him into my corporate band immediately. But I said, we need to work together. I've got some songs. And he said, "Oh, really?" So, yeah, so we got together, and I played him a couple of songs. And I said, a guy I used to play with, John Wysocki, just moved to town. He's not in the band Stained anymore. He left the band. And I'm thinking about putting something together, but I have one song I wrote. We should, let's get together and just cut a song. So we go down to a studio that I was producing out of quite a bit, Capricorn Soundworks in Nashville. We put down the song, this song called Bleed. And I'm not kidding, man, we hit the chorus and just started doing some layering, and I was like, uh-oh. Man, I really don't want to start a band. I don't have time to start a band. I cannot start a band right now. Just no time. It's going to be a lot of effort, but man, it was grabbing at my soul. This thing, this sound I had walked away from once before. This band that had a special sound, and the timing wasn't right, so I left it. And I always regretted that, because when you have a special connection and a chemistry, it just can't be replicated. You can't say, oh, well, we're just going to do it like this, same music. It doesn't work. It's all about the players, the approach, and I didn't want to let it go. So I said, well, guys, we got to do a record. We got to do the record. And, hence that was the birth of Save the World. And it's a project that I'm really, really, really proud of. We tried to put 10 hits on a record, not a single and a bunch of filler songs. We worked for 3 years on this record. Robert engineered it, produced it, played a bunch of stuff on it. He's amazing. And John played drums. We all played drums on a couple of the songs. So we're kind of, that's my new baby. And Alan was kind enough to even assist with that. He makes a cameo on one of the tunes, and 2 of the songs were actually written for an Alan Parsons record, but he wasn't ready to make one yet, so we tossed it on ours.
Right. Yeah, well, I've listened to the record, and it's fantastic.
Well, thank you.
And we're going to drop a needle on a couple of those during this
Great
podcast episode. Of course, I can't do it right now, but I'll drop it in before
you'll slide it in
before everybody hears it. Yeah, we'll fly it in.
One interesting story. One interesting story about Robert too. I think that is worth noting. Robert actually came to Nashville with another guy, a singer-songwriter guy, and I don't want to name the artist, but anyway, he ended up getting a deal. And this guy was, like most people get a brand new record deal. You go to the bottom of the pack unless you're going to have a lot of money tossed at you. And eventually, a year went by. Record company just kind of, held on to him and didn't do anything with it. And Robert had put a year of his life into this and was really upset about it. So he told the guy, I'll tell you what. He goes, come to my house. He goes, we're going to do the record. I'm going to produce it. And this is unheard of back then, by the way. Everybody's working with record companies, big studios on the row. And this guy's like, well, what have I got to lose? You believe in me, so let's do it. So they went back and they cut a whole record, and Robert said, one condition, I picked the songs. So Robert went out to all the publishing houses, and he got great songs. Fast forward, they even find a way to release the record. It goes to number 1. And all of a sudden they got every record company, beating their doors down. And he's got a gold record out of his house, which was unheard of back then. So now the phone starts ringing, And he did it again the following year with the follow-up record with this guy. And so he's such a talent. I'm really, really blessed to be able to work with this guy because he gets me musically, too. We both have that cut from the same cloth, totally raised on the same music, big, wide breadth of different styles of music. Both of us, especially on this record, which I think makes our record different, we don't like genres, man. We just want to put songs on great songs. I don't care what genre you think this is. We've got some stuff that's heavy. We've got some stuff that's soft. We've got some stuff that's, got loops in it. It's all a little different. But we tie it all together with the sound of the band, the guitar tones we came up with, our drum tones, the vocal harmony stuff, big harmonies. They're all big, epic production songs. But anyway, I really wanted to tell you about Robert because he's kind of the secret weapon of that band. He really is.
Now, so what's happening with that band right now? Have you guys? I know that you've released the record. What's going on with it? Have you gotten any airplay or?
We released a record. It's we're doing well over in Europe, but we want that always sounds great. We went cardboard in Europe, but we're looking at 2 labels right now, and we're trying to figure out what the best fit for us is on that. I really need to get it out just to more people. We haven't. We've done a little bit of promotion on social media, that kind of stuff, but we're out touring with different artists. I just don't have time for that whole thing. So we're hoping to bring that whole package to somebody that can really put the machinery in place to get it to as many ears as possible. That's where we're at now.
Well, being on my podcast I'm sure you're going to see record sales jump.
This is it, guys.
By tens of tens.
The album's called One. You can get it on Amazon Music. You can get it on iTunes, or you can go to our site, savetheworldband.com, and there's a page where you can buy the CD and even get an autographed copy, shirts, T-shirts, the whole 9 yards.
Nice.
Shameless promotion.
Nice. Well, hey, that's what it takes, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a big record company behind you to do the promotion, so you got to do it yourself.
Yeah, I hate promoting. I just want to write songs, Ross.
I know, but, sometimes you got to toot your own horn there, Danny.
Once again, that doesn't really happen here in Nashville so much. It's all about the work. So hopefully our work speaks for itself 3 years into it. So we'd love it if somebody picked it up.
Are you already planning a second Save the World record at this time?
Yeah, I've got 6 tunes, and I'm just waiting for Robert to clean up his plate a little bit, and we're going to get started on some sketches for the next part. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool. And you're still playing with Alan, of course. I know that you guys are going out in a couple days to do some shows in the Midwest, right?
That's correct. We're doing Texas and Oklahoma, and then coming up, we're doing everywhere from I think Pennsylvania all the way up to Boston, coming up in November, I believe. So we'd love to see all the fans out there. We've got great loyal fans, and we enjoy that.
Of course. And any other projects that you're planning on doing in the near future?
Well, there's this one project. It's the Alan Parsons, the record. I think it's going to be, he's calling it his final record. So that's the biggest shout out we need to give to our boss. And I think he poured his heart into this. You're going to get, last couple previous albums might not have been as classic Alan Parsons, but this one I think is going to be classic Alan Parsons. He worked hard on it. This is his first record with his own studio from his house. That's a full-blown studio with a Neve console, all his toys that really brought him to the dance. And I got to tell you, man, it's been great watching him work. He's so happy. He's just so happy in his element there. And of course, he's a good musician on stage with our band and everything, and band leader, but when he's in his element, this is what he does. This is what the guy does, and it's really, really cool to watch him do his thing.
Now, there's some other songs on the record that were written by other members of the Alan Parsons Band, too. Todd Cooper.
Yep, Todd Cooper. PJ's got a song.
Too, right?
Yep, PJ's got a couple songs, and Guy Erez, our bass player, has songs. Tom has contributed. Everybody's contributed, even Alan's son-in-law, Jordan Huffman, has a song that we wrote together that's on the record, and he's actually singing that one. But I think it's going to be something for everybody. If you love the classic stuff, you're going to get that and more. He takes it somewhere. Sonically, it's going to be incredible because he didn't cheap out on anything. I mean, real strings, real horns. I got to tell you, man, just today, I got an email. I wrote a little arrangement for the front of one of the songs that I wrote for this, and Alan was gracious enough to bring it down to Capitol and have a 40-piece string ensemble play this little introduction, and man, it floored me. So there's some really great, epic, old school production that goes into this, like you would expect from a guy of his caliber, and there's some surprises on this record too, and I think everybody's going to really like it.
That's fantastic. That's great, Dan. Well, you've had a great career so far, and I know that you've got many years to go. You'll probably be doing lots more great projects. I appreciate you taking the time to record this. Now, for you people out there, the way we're recording this, I've never done any of my podcasts this way before, but I'm at home in my studio. Dan is at a studio in Nashville, and he's recording his end of it there, which he'll send to me via email right after we're done, and then I'm going to put it all together. So we got good quality. I can't stand interviews with people on telephones. It just drives me crazy.
Yeah, that's a shout out to Grant Goddard here at his studio. Wonderful studio, nice API console. It's Old Hickory Recording. Anybody in the area here, if you're looking to make some music, come on down. Anyhow, he was very kind to set this up. We're in the middle of actually cutting some background vocals right now for Alan's record. So we took a break to do this. Of course, once again, Ross, you threw a wrench in my plans. But that's okay, because I love you.
Of course.
Hey, man, I got to give a shout-out to Ross, too. Ross Pallone. Learned a lot from this guy. Great hang on the road. I mean, your resume itself is pretty scary. And, it's been great being your friend, got to tell you.
Oh, well, thanks, Dan. Both ways. Great having you as my friend also. And you have been a true friend, besides just somebody that I work with.
Thanks, buddy. I feel the same way.
All right,
well, let's kiss and say goodbye now.
All right, Danny. All right, man. Well, we're going to say goodbye, and
all right, buddy.
Take care, Dan. We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage podcast so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me at rosspallone.com. Thank you for listening.
2,000 years of conflict and sacrifice, and while we're bleeding, dying, the prince has brought the tides. Keep you subservient, crawling there on the floor, begging for bread, but loyal forevermore. You follow them to war. Of angry seas, though we might be held down by the supreme ones, just like the sleeping sun. One day we will rise. Take all the Just look into a child's eyes and ask yourself one more time, what are we fighting for anyway? Despite all our differences, the salt in our tears, our joys and our fears, they're all the same. Tragoste e nava, ich liebe dich.